Welcome to Fair Play for All, everyone. But before we start, we're excited to share a special partnership with Innovate UK, providing support through creative industries and their Bridge AI programmes, and as part of the CMC conference here in Sheffield, a meeting of creative and business development minds for everyone involved in content for kids. So thank you to Innovate UK. Here we are for the Play for All, where we're going to explore how to design and build the AI playgrounds of the future, making sure it's safe, fair and accessible for every child. We know that kids want to play and create, but as creators, policymakers and technologists, we have to play the responsible adults. Today, we'll hear how we can embed children's rights, voices and well-being at the heart of AI design and experiences, from policy to practice to product to content. So I'm delighted to be joined by three brilliant panellists. I'm very excited about this. Dr. Vari Aiken, Senior Ethics Fellow at the Alan Turing Institute, whose research puts children's experiences and data justice at the forefront of AI ethics. Colette Collins-Walsh, Head of UK Affairs at the Five Rights Foundation, who's helping shape the new AI design code that sets out what fair, safe AI looks like for children. And Rishi Kapoor, co-founder and CEO of North AI and an industry innovator, designing and developing new capabilities that help creators build better, safer media. So together we're going to tackle big questions. How do we listen to children and build AI that works for them? How do we make sure digital playgrounds are safe and inclusive, not just for some, but for all? And what practical steps we can take to keep children's rights and well-being at the centre of innovation? I realise I haven't introduced myself. I'll step back a bit there and say I'm John Howard. I'm a head of Gen AI Hub at the BBC. I've been at the BBC in my 19th year, and for most of that I've been in children's education. I've been running Gen AI pilots looking at AI tutoring, and I've now taken up a new role of looking at how to bring the benefits of generative AI into production workflows, to ethically use Gen AI as tools within the creation of content for productivity enhancements and cost reductions. So really exciting space to hopefully bring the BBC and let us be the ethical exemplar of how to use Gen AI in a really good way. So happy to talk about things afterwards, but we're not going to talk about me. We're going to talk about our wonderful guests, and very excited because I've worked closely with the Alan Turing Institute and with Five Rights before, and so it's always been a privilege, and I'm really excited to hear Rishi's journey. So let's get started. Mary, what we're going to do is first go through the speakers and let them do an introduction themselves. So, Vari, do you want to kick off?
Thank you. Yes, I'm Vari Aiken. I'm a Senior Ethics Fellow at the Alan Turing Institute. And at the Turing Institute, the Alan Turing Institute is the UK's National Institute for AI and Data Science. And at the Turing Institute, I lead a programme of work around children and AI. The rationale or the driver behind this programme of work is a recognition that children and young people are likely to be the group that will be most impacted by advances in AI technologies. But at the same time, they're the group that are least represented in decision-making about the ways that those technologies are designed, developed and used, and also in decision-making around policy and regulatory responses to AI. So we think that's wrong, we think that needs to change. And so the work that we do at the Alan Turing Institute is really aiming to develop and demonstrate approaches to give children and young people a voice in influencing and shaping decisions around the ways that AI systems are designed, developed and deployed, and also feeding into and informing policy and regulatory discussions. So we've been working in this area for about 4 years now, in a number of different projects. So we've had collaborations with UNICEF, also with the Council of Europe Steering Committee on the Rights of the Child, where we've looked at existing kind of governance and regulatory frameworks around AI and children's rights. Over the last 4 years, we've also been collaborating with Children's Parliament in Scotland and the Scottish AI Alliance, directly engaging children and young people, particularly children between the ages of 8 and 12, to explore their experiences with AI, to explore how AI affects them and their lives, but really importantly, to develop approaches that can give children a voice and to explore how they want to be involved in shaping the future of AI. We've also recently just published a set of reports from a research project in collaboration with the LEGO Group, where we were looking particularly at impacts of generative AI on children, and again, particularly focusing on children between the ages of 8 and 12. And then one other big thing that we did earlier this year was that we held the Children's AI Summit, and that took place in February, brought together around 150 children and young people between the ages of 8 and 18 from right across the UK to explore their experiences with AI, but really importantly, for them to share their messages for world leaders for what they wanted on the agenda at the AI Action Summit in Paris. And from the Children's AI Summit, we produced the Children's Manifesto for the Future of AI. I urge you all, please, to look it up and have a read. It's written almost entirely in the words of the children and young people themselves. We took the Children's Manifesto for the Future of AI to Paris, to the AI Action Summit, and it was presented there by a 12-year-old child. And that is really what this work is all about, giving children a voice, giving them an influence, and putting children at the centre when we think about shaping the future of AI.
Brilliant, thanks, Valerie. Colette.
Thanks, John. So I'm Colette. I'm Head of UK Affairs at the Five Rights Foundation. And if you don't know us, we are an NGO who works to advocate for children's rights to be considered in digital services and products. And our overall aim is to see children centred in design as becoming like a tech industry norm. And it's through this prism that we view AI. It's exactly the same. And it's in this spirit that earlier this year we launched our Children in AI design code. I'm going to use my time just to talk a little bit about why children require their own approach to AI, and a bit about the solution that we sort of came up with. First of all, we think that children just aren't anywhere in the national conversations that we're having about AI. And that's a big problem because they are using AI products and they're impacted by them much more than adults are, actually. And when we speak to children, they're equal parts sort of anxious and excited by AI. They're quite intrigued by companionship bots like character AI and things like that. But then they also are quietly a bit anxious or unsure if they should be using them or if they can trust them. The same with using ChatGPT for schoolwork. They do use it, but then they will say to us, but actually I'm not really sure that it's helping me learn. It was just sort of like a quick thing that we did. And honestly, they're right to be concerned about AI because they're much more exposed to the risks and much more likely to be impacted by it. So thinking about biases in LLMs, it's profoundly impactful on their lives long term. Or thinking about chatbots and things like that they might be using. They are, because of their cognitive function, they have less self-regulation. They're still learning. So they're much more likely to trust the things that a chatbot might tell them in a way that an adult might question, which is why we sort of came up with the code, and that's what underpins it. So what is it? It's a framework or a tool to support designers or creators to identify, understand and mitigate the risks to children throughout the AI life cycle. It's for, could be used by gaming companies, social media networks, but it's also for policymakers and regulators. And literally what is it? So it's 9 criterion that are sort of based across sort of like 9 stages of an AI life cycle. So right at the beginning to right at the end when you might decommission it. And the criteria are things like, is it fair, safe? Is it age appropriate? Is it accessible? Is it transparent? And is it underpinned by children's rights as set out in the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child? And I think that, where we are in AI is not new, of course it's not, but where we are now with the sort of speed at which it's being kind of embedded in products that children use or services that they use, we've got a real opportunity, I guess, to get it right, because we've seen, 15 years of a tech industry that was, move fast and break things, but actually it was children that suffered. So that's what our code is intended to try to stop from happening.
Brilliant, looking forward to learning more. Rishi, you've got a deck.
I've got slides because I thought everyone loves PowerPoint. Rishi Kapoor, co-founder and CEO of North AI. North AI is an AI model that predicts how audiences are going to respond to content at the pre-flight stages. So it helps content creators maximize their content for the best possible success. A problem we're solving is that loads of money spent on content. It's all doing the same thing. It's is trying to grab our attention, and it could be anything. When I say content, it could be, it's a TikTok video all the way through to a Netflix series to a children's production. The main aim is to try and grab someone's attention, whether to educate them, inspire them, but it's all around how do you engage them. And the measurements right now explain very little about how audiences are engaged. So we're solving that by combining both AI and neuroscience. So we combine cognitive sciences. So when we say we're an AI company, we're actually not. We're a neuro AI company. And so we use neuroscience to predict how content's going to react at the very early stages, from creators and social, through to films, TV and games, all the way through to adverts. And so we're really focused on how can you predict how people are going to respond emotionally to a content, how they're going to engage cognitively with the content that you're trying to test. This is a proprietary model that we built. It's not a wrapper over ChatGPT or anything. We've built this model, and it's trained on the brain scans of real people. So we've done hundreds of evaluations measuring millions of data points on brain signals and brain scans on how we train this model. As you'll notice, there are no children here, which we'll talk about. But we've trained this model based on real people. It's a combination of human interactions to train an AI model to almost simulate how audiences are going to respond to content. Now, the question we get all the time is like, all right, that's cool, but what if I don't have my content to test? What if I don't have anything that's produced? So we did this test here where we took an advert. This was a Ridley Scott advert for Apple, which was 1.6 million to produce and took 6 months. And we took a frame-by-frame replica generated by AI that cost $100 and took 4 hours. And we measured the difference between them. This is not to say, by the way, that one's as better quality or not. It's not a quality discussion. It's around, can you use this $100 version that took 4 hours to measure accurately how people are going to react to the content when it's deployed live? And we found there's obviously variance, right? It's not the same thing. But the variance is really small in terms of storyline, in terms of information processing, in terms of emotional reaction. It was about 10% variance across all these things. We're measuring everything from head movements to content gaze to screen time. How many times people look away and check Instagram on their phone? All these things we measure to understand how people are engaged. And so if you think about it, if you're producing children's content and you've maybe got 10 different ideas, in a day, you could produce all 10 of those ideas and then test it, and it'll come out with the one that's going to be the most engaging. Or maybe you want to measure how informative it is, how well this educational content is for people to understand. We can measure all those things. We've won many awards. This is scientifically approved, so it's backed by research. Innovate UK, helpfully, have backed us 4 times, and we've raised venture funds. So we've been recognized for the work that we've done in the space of neuroscience and AI. And my background, some overlap in children's content because I come from a studio background working with children's series when I was in a corporate role, and had a startup in 2020, so my second company. And so if anyone wants to get in touch and figure out how the hell neuroscience works, feel free to scan this and reach out. And that's 3 minutes. I think it was 3 minutes, right?
Very good. Thank you.
I took it as a personal challenge to get as many things in 3 minutes.
That's mind-blowing, as well as brainwave reading. So I want for us to get into the idea of listening to children and building AI that works for them. Barry, I could pronounce that. I'll get it right. Earlier this year, you ran the Children's AI Summit, where children expressed nuanced views on AI's role in education and the environment and other areas. So how can developers, policymakers, program makers ensure that diverse perspectives are not only heard, but also shape AI policies and applications?
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely the crux of it, and that's why it's so important. As Colette said, we know that children of all ages are already regularly interacting with AI on a daily basis, and that starts from preschool children, infants, playing with smart toys or smart devices, as well as kind of interacting with content online. I think what's really important and why we really need children's voice in this process is that we know that children are very often early adopters of new technologies, particularly digital technologies, but we also know that children and young people tend to use those technologies in very different ways from how adults use them. And also use them in very different ways from how the designers or developers of the systems anticipate that they're going to be used. And what that means is that even with the kind of the best of intentions, adults working in this space, if we start from a kind of an adult's assumption about what we expect on these technologies based on how adults interact with those technologies, we might miss really important aspects of how they impact children and young people. We might miss opportunities to develop and use those tools well to support children, but we also miss insights into what the real risks are or the real potential harms are. And we can only really understand that by engaging directly with children and young people, just speaking to them directly and giving them a voice, and understanding what their actual experiences are. And Children's AI Summit was really focused on doing that and giving children and young people a voice and exploring what their actual experiences are, what their actual concerns are, what their interests are. And as you said, it revealed very nuanced perspectives, definitely not kind of black and white arguments. Children talked to us a lot about, that they're excited about the ways that AI can be used, particularly, say, in education, particularly for supporting students with additional learning needs, additional support needs, and they're really excited about the opportunities to use AI. But at the same time, they know that there's risks, and they have lots of concerns, and they want those concerns addressed. What came out really clearly from the Children's AI Summit was that they want the focus to be on, what are developers doing to make sure these systems are safe? What are policymakers doing? What are regulators doing to make sure that children are safeguarded and protected? And that is, I think, a really important, powerful message, and it kind of reminds us that we need, not just that we need children's voices in the mix, but that actually having children's voices in the mix gives opportunities to do things better. So we're not just doing it because, tick the box and you should engage children, or it's a nice thing to do, but actually we can build things better, we can make them work better, we can increase the value that's offered, and also make better regulation and policy by having children as part of the process.
Great. In a similar vein, the Five Rights Foundation emphasises the importance of incorporating children's voices in digital design. So, in your observations and experience, Colette, what are the effective methods for translating children's feedback into actionable insights for AI system development?
I think it's quite literal, actually. So I just agree with everything that was said there, but I would also just add as well that children often have the best ideas. And I sit in rooms all the time with, really senior officials, ministers, tech companies. We're all sitting around going like, gosh, how can we make this safer, or how can we make this better for kids? And you spend like 10 minutes with them and they'll give you like five things, that they don't like or that they would like better. So quite literally, sometimes I will lift something that they have said and then put it in a briefing. And then, when we were working on the online safety bill, Now Act, for example, a lot of the very specific recommendations they have made it now into legislation and into regulation. It's things that Ofcom are now have now put in their children's code that tech companies have to do. There are also different approaches, such as because obviously it's very risk-based as well. It's not just getting their views, but sometimes you need to test these systems. So things like using avatars are very useful, so that you're not exposing children to risk as well. And then also there are lots of organisations around the country as well who can help you do some really good, and I know that you worked with the Youth Parliament, for example, and there's also Young Scots, there's the Mayor's Fund, who will help you speak to young people to make sure that you're centering their voices right at the beginning of the process.
I always like that when Five Rights publish a new document, it's always presented by children up front, and that's a really powerful delivery mechanic I buy into wholeheartedly. Rishi, North AI focuses on understanding audience engagement through AI and neuroscience, as you've shown. In your experience, what are the challenges and opportunities in integrating feedback from younger audiences into the AI models and the tools you're making, especially considering the evolving cognitive and emotional development?
So our challenges, it can be perceived as highly intrusive, right? You're scanning people's brains to try and read their mind when they're watching stuff, see how engaged they are, and that then helps us train a model. And we use remote versions of this, which is eye tracking and analysis using a webcam. But I gotta say one thing about when it comes to children, we have left them out of this first version, mostly because I'm scared of figuring out how I work with children. And it's not something that a lot of startups, tech companies like ours, get a lot of support with. Like, how do you, we know there's loads of stuff around how do you protect people's data and people's rights, but children is such a sensitive subject that for us, we just get very scared about how do you work with children. So whenever we get asked, we did a thing with Disney, but we didn't measure with children. Just last week, someone said, oh, I know someone who works at Bluey. They would love to look at this. And I said, yeah. And in my mind, I said, no, I'm not. I'm not going to follow up. Because we just, for now, we just can't touch it because we don't know how to safely work with children's data in the most appropriate way. And I take it very seriously because it's one thing you just cannot get wrong. And then there's a question on inclusivity as well, because if you want to bring a child into a lab and try and measure their engagement to make a better model for them, it's going to require people who have the ability to get to where we are and have a parent that can take a Wednesday afternoon off to bring their child. And that's like only a certain amount of people can do that. And so we have a question like, how do you make this inclusive as possible? And all those questions, so I don't have any good answers for them, but those are questions that we ask ourselves all the time. That's why I'm here, I'm trying to figure out. I might join the audience.
At the BBC, we find the same things. If you're not in the children's education space, then and they're developing a tool or a function or a platform, they will frequently say, oh no, it's too complicated to go into the children's space. We'll just be like, we'll come back to children's afterwards. Yeah. And then they never do. So because they make a thing that's inappropriate, it doesn't save the data in a way that we can use. Yeah. So we always try and drive into that. No, you have to think about children first, then it's available for everybody. Yeah. But yeah, if you're a startup, then you don't have the experience or the knowledge. So hopefully there's some way that we can work out of sharing that knowledge more widely.
I guess also it's the budget of getting good lawyers and people to look at your policies and getting it, then redrafting it to make it appropriate for children, and then getting someone who's in this space, who's an expert, like one of you guys, and to come in and advise. And like that, first of all, takes time and it's expensive. And there's the two things that startups don't have. And so, we got approached with they were the German equivalent of BBC, so ARD, A-R-D.
A-R-D,
yeah. And they were like, we'd love to do this piece of work with you. And they gave us like a massive document, all this stuff they needed. And for us, like, we can't do that. We just don't have the time. We're running as quickly as possible. It's that startup mentality, right? It's like move fast, but be safe. And to move fast and be safe, unfortunately, means you've got to sideline data analytics when it comes to children, and then figure that out later when you're much bigger. Which means that much bigger AI companies can solve that now because they got the expensive lawyers and got the expensive people that can then help them figure it out. And so there's definitely a gap. I'm yet to meet one AI company, AI startup at our stage who's absolutely nailed it when it comes to figuring out how you safely and accurately measure children's data.
It's a really good perspective. Barry, from your research and children's rights and AI design, how do children want to see AI develop and what don't they want to see?
Oh, lots of things. Obviously, safety and security is a big part of this. We've recently, as I said again, we've recently completed a research project in collaboration with the Lego Group where we were looking at children's experiences with generative AI. And in that research, we ran workshops in schools where we had children between the ages of 9 and 11. We never gave children direct access to generative AI models because we are not aware of any that are designed with children's interests in mind that are safe for children to use. But we had a kind of a facilitated process where children could get prompts to remember the research, say we put it in and we showed them the outputs. And very, very often, alarmingly often, we found that where children gave us very innocent, innocuous prompts, the image that was generated had maybe something slightly sexualized, something slightly violent, something inappropriate, something we couldn't show to children. Obviously, we didn't show those outputs to children, but we did discuss why we weren't showing the outputs to children. And they found this really frustrating, really upsetting. They obviously speak about, they want to be able to benefit from and experience these technologies, and we know that many of them are at home using these tools and these technologies, but they want to feel safe doing that. And they don't want to feel that it's their responsibility to take so many measures or so many actions to keep themselves safe online why can't they have a safe online environment that they can learn in, that they can play in, that they can be creative in, without having to worry about these kinds of risks? And I think that's something that comes out really, really strongly. Also, lots of other concerns. I mean, one of the big things that comes out really consistently for all the work we do engaging children in discussions around AI is one of the biggest concerns is the environmental impacts of AI, and particularly generative AI. And that's something that's come out really strongly for all of our work. Children are really, really concerned about the environmental impacts of AI models, particularly generative AI models. In those workshops where children had a chance to learn about the environmental impacts of generative AI, many of the children then chose not to use generative AI again and said quite simply, I don't want to engage with these tools because I'm aware that they have significant water impact and emissions. And so they didn't want to engage with those tools. And I think that's really important. And it's something that we all should pay attention to, partly about how we make sure that there's transparency around reporting of environmental impacts so people can make informed choices, but also so that developers and organizations who are deploying these systems can take account of that, and to the environmental impacts of AI should be one of the key factors that we have that's in the mix when we're making decisions about whether or not to use these tools. There's a lot more, but I'll pause there.
That's brilliant, thanks. Just to say, we're going to be having Q&A at the end, so get your questions ready. Jump onto ChatGPT or whatever function you want to find there. So I want to move into ensuring that the digital playgrounds, the areas that and the experiences that children are going to have with AI that we develop, how do we make them safe and inclusive, I think is key. So Colette, Five Rights has been instrumental in advocating for children's digital rights. What challenges have been encountered in pushing for the legal safeguards, and how can the children's media industry support those efforts?
So I think that, we discussed this earlier off stage, people can be a bit intimidated by the concept of children's rights. But actually they're quite sort of practical and a bit of a no-brainer. So things like safety, but also they have a right to play, and a right to education, and a right to privacy. So I think it's about kind of like just really breaking them down into the sort of like the no-brainers that you if you were to create something for a child or sell it to a child, or you wanted a child to use it, you would probably be doing anyway, just as sort of basic due diligence. In terms of, what was the question about, like legal challenges?
Yeah, so obviously Five Rights have been involved with many kind of legal and UN comments, etc. So are there any challenges in the AI space that have been experienced, or just a digital creation?
I think in the AI space, I think there's a bit of it feels new, although it's not new. And I think that people think, oh, this is a new thing, and there are new problems and new risks and new mitigations we must come up with. But we think that when it comes to children, actually, and probably everyone, it doesn't necessarily create new risks or new challenges. Thinking about harms to children online, for example, AI just risks amplifying them and spreading them further. So actually, we kind of know what to do. And the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child and its general comment 25 are like a really good sort of basis to try and help you sort of sort through those. But also there's a well-established 4 Cs of risks to children online, which apply just as well as they do in AI spaces as they do just, I guess, in traditional social media or gaming where children can be found.
Great. Rishi, from the starter point of view, so safety and inclusivity are paramount in children's media. How can AI tools like the ones that you're developing be designed or modified to proactively identify, mitigate inappropriate or non-inclusive content? Is that a...
Yeah, so everything that we're doing is to try and make content more relevant to the audience, which starts off with the audience first, and it goes, and the inclusivity is a big question that we're trying to solve, which the way we've solved it is by creating a model that solely relies on remote neuroanalysis, which means that we can use a webcam, which again has its own problems. You got to be a child that has a laptop, or a family that has a laptop or a phone, which a lot of them do, but a lot of them also don't. And so there is a massive inclusivity problem when it comes to any AI model. I mean, the way we're hopefully going to go about it is, first of all, that one I just mentioned, which is traditionally any audience testing has always been done in fairly urban settings, and when it involves children, it means that you have to have a parent that brings that child. And so, how many parents, like I said, can take a Wednesday afternoon off, just spend a couple of hours? It's a big challenge for a lot of parents. And so the way we've solved that is to make it fully remote, anytime, anywhere. So we can run a test study on a group of children in a remote village in India at the same time as we can do it in London, right? And get the same data and same results and train the model the exact same way. Our challenge is figuring out how you do it safely. And actually I agree, it's not rocket science to do. Sometimes it's also a bit of a branding thing, that when you say, we're now measuring brain patterns of children, there's a bit of a stigma to it, right?
Mm.
Suddenly all eyes are on you, whether it's any different to how you're doing it currently and you're just making some small modifications for children. Not only is it more sensitive data, but everyone around you becomes more sensitive. And so you really have to make sure that everything is completely transparent, it's a work in progress for us. It's what we're working on.
I guess there are these new kind of bridges that are being built into different data areas. When I was a kid, I knew I needed glasses, but I didn't want to wear glasses because it was uncool. But I became very good at identifying people by their gait, and I would recognise people. And you realise now in metaverse type experiences, you can recognise people, so that it is an identifying parameter. So these areas that you don't think are data that is private, suddenly are, and they're being exposed. So. And you're building a bridge into a new space where we don't understand what is it. There's lots of questions that I've got in my head about that once we dug into over the years. So Vari, your work highlights concerns about AI's potential biases and impact on children's well-being. What safeguarding should be in place to ensure AI systems are both safe and inclusive for all children, regardless of their background?
Yeah, I think it's a really big challenge, and it's something that's come out again really strongly in the research we've done. Again, in the research I mentioned before, sponsored by Lego, looking at generative AI, one of the other things that came out really strongly there was concerns around bias and representation or misrepresentation. Another thing that we found in these workshops where we were generating outputs based on children's prompts was every time a child asked for an image of a person, it would pretty much 100% of the time it would generate an image that was male and almost exclusively white. What that meant was that the ways that children did or did not feel represented through the outputs of those models really varied depending on children's identities. And children expressed real frustrations about that, really felt upset about that. And this is something that's come out not just in this project around generative AI, but around all the work we've done engaging children in discussions around AI, a real consistent focus on fairness and equity, and wanting answers as to why these models are producing biased outputs, why are they producing outputs that are unfair, and why is that allowed? I think often when we talk to adults about issues around fairness or bias or representation in AI models, adults are very quick to come up with that's not right, but it's because of X, Y, Z, or it's because of this, or it's because of that, or it's really difficult to address. And when we talk to children say, that's not right, that's wrong, that's not okay, like why isn't that being changed? That needs to be changed. And I think that's the attitude we need, right? Because these things can be addressed and they should be addressed. And there's much more that could be done by developers to identify biases within data sets and to take measures to address those in the ways the models are trained and the outputs that are produced. And it's really, really crucial. So that's something that's come out really strongly from the research as something that the children and young people are calling for and want much more done to address that. I'm not sure if I answered the question.
There was something around equity and regardless of their background. We know that there's a tendency for new technology to be used by those from more who had backgrounds that give them access to that. So different demographics have less access. Is there anything from your work that's kind of showing a reach for bringing back equity?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, well, first in terms of showing that pattern for sure. Again, in this project, we also had a survey. We surveyed around 800 children between the ages of 8 and 12, as well as their parents and carers. And in that survey, we found that a quarter of children between 8 and 12 reported using generative AI, and most were using it on at least a monthly basis. But when we looked into the trends within that data, we found that children who attended private schools were significantly more likely to use generative AI, but importantly also were significantly more likely to report having been taught about generative AI or having some previous understanding about generative AI. And I think that's really important, that it's not just about access or use of the tools, but it's also about the opportunities to learn about those tools and where information is being provided about those tools. That, particularly with there's lots of excitement and interest around the ways that generative AI could be used to support in learning and education. But if these tools or the knowledge about these tools is not equitably distributed, is more likely to be among more privileged groups, more privileged children, then there's a real risk that this actually exacerbates existing inequities in education. And while there's huge potential for these tools to kind of level the playing field or open up opportunities to access in education, the way that they're perhaps currently being accessed, risks that is actually exacerbating and making those inequities worse.
So yeah, I definitely think there's a big piece about training and providing access to knowledge about the opportunities. That's going to be an important thing. I want to move into kind of centering children's rights and well-being on AI innovation. So Colette, what practical measures can AI developers, experienced designers implement that ensure that children's rights are prioritised throughout that AI life cycle?
Well, I plug our code. It's our children AI design code. That's what underpins it, and it's written by us, but then by designers, by child rights experts. Children themselves have fed into it, academics, but all of it is underpinned by children's rights, which I sort of mentioned earlier. Shouldn't necessarily be kind of like a scary or kind of an existential thing that I'll never be able to solve. And it's all about kind of balance. I think fundamentally it's about considering children in all of their differences, which is what children's rights seek to kind of deliver in some way. The things that Valerie was talking about with regards to, children from lower income backgrounds and higher income backgrounds, but then also children in different age groups as well, like age appropriate experiences are a big part of children's rights. And the code actually has a bit at the back. It's like an actual document which talks about what's happening to children at different ages and how they might be using AI and how you should think about like the risks or opportunities at each stage. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, you're right. I think the AI code, I think, is going to be a really important tool in supporting developers as they move forward, and it does kind of list out as one that I've been engaging with. So, did anyone go to the Ofcom session yesterday and see the brain rot material that they showed? Terrifying. Exciting, enthralling. So these are videos that are online, Skibbity toilet, etc. So they take very little engagement, but they kind of have a blandness that require no brain power to engage, but is a comfortable space to be. So I felt, when we cut back to the conversation, no, play more, almost immediately, and you could see why children can resolve in that. And we all doom scroll. Surely, hands up if you don't doom scroll. That's what I thought, yeah. So we all do that, so we all fall into that. Rishi, do you see a role for North AI in collaborating with children's media creators to develop tools that not only predict engagement, but also promote healthy media consumption habits?
Yeah, absolutely. We have the right tools to do that. We have the perfect tool to do that for children, and we have the mechanisms in place to be able to evaluate hundreds. You could, in theory, take 100 different children's ideas and produce them all and run it through our platform and figure out which one's the most engaging, most informative, the one that has most educational value to all different demographics, right, from different backgrounds. And we can measure that. One video will have, 12 different personas of profiles that we can evaluate to say which parts of a piece of content are the most engaging, most relevant to different groups. So we definitely have the perfect tool, and we're actually looking for people and companies to work with. Our problem, our struggle, as I mentioned, is like, BBC, you have departments, right? You have a department. This is our HR department. We don't have I am the department, right? And so it's like, how do you, when it all falls on us as a team, there's 9 of us, it's like, who's going to be the one that figures all this out and makes, it's something small, like we were talking about, a consent mechanism, making a consent form really child-friendly. Who's going to be the one that understands, is this child-friendly now? I'm not going to ask a lawyer. The lawyer's going to make it worse. So who's going to? Sorry, no offense. So yeah, absolutely. We'd love to. We have the right tools for it. We need the right companies to work with. The Bloom one might be a great one. I should maybe respond to this person.
It certainly puts me in mind of behavioural insights and nudge theory. If we're talking about forms and trying to make them more adaptable, and you're kind of supporting trying to do some ethical use of creation that way.
Yeah. Well, by the way, we're not trying to make kids addicted or hooked. It's not about how do you make something that's like so compelling that they just can't focus on anything else. It's like getting the right mix of content so it's informative. It achieves what the producer wants it to achieve. They'll want it to be funny, entertaining, informative, what parts. So we can measure that and then tell them pretty quickly. So the thing that you mentioned, brain rot is cognitive load of information processing, which you can measure through how often people blink and how many times they move their eyes when they're watching it, and all these things we can measure around 35 to 40,000 data points every minute. So that brain rot video will have all the data and compare different levels of brain rot. I don't know what the term is, but you know what I'm getting at.
It did make it into the dictionary, brain rot, but it was fairly new on me yesterday.
It's awful, isn't it?
Is it just a new form of content? I don't know yet. I'm reserving my opinion until I've kind of consumed some more. We'll see. So, Valerie, in your opinion, what are the most pressing ethical considerations developers or designers should keep in mind to ensure AI innovations prioritise children's well-being?
I think I think it's a kind of a different way of thinking about how we approach AI or kind of how we develop AI. A lot of the current models, I mean, as I said, they're not developed with children in mind, and that's where a lot of the problems start, because these are tools that we know children and young people are accessing, even if they're below the age where technically they should be, but we know that they are, and they're not developed with children's interests in mind, and so they create particular risks. But also a lot of these platforms and services are underpinned by fairly exploitative business practices. Right? A lot of these models, it's really about collecting data, processing data for commercial purposes. And that, again, is where a lot of the problems start, because a lot of these are services or platforms or systems that there's maybe this thing on the surface that a child might be interacting with, but actually what is happening is what's under the surface, which is the data collection and the processing, and creating kind of addictive, content that is designed to keep users kind of hooked, keep them engaged. I think we need to really think differently about this. And when we're developing AI systems for children or AI systems that children might be interacting with, we have to start with thinking about children's well-being and children's rights, and think of what that means. And actually that leads to fundamentally quite different approaches, different business models, or it should, I think, that will be positive and beneficial for children and young people. I think it needs to start with that. That can't be something that we address afterwards. It can't be something that, once a system is there, or a model is there and is being used, that then afterwards we think, okay, how can we now make this safe for kids to use? It needs to be at the beginning. We need to think about children's rights, children's interests, children's well-being right at the beginning.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. Well, we talked about how we listen to children, how we make sure we can build safe and inclusive digital playgrounds, and the practical steps that we can bring in for children's rights and well-being. I'm sure there's a load of other areas that we can dig into. So if we've got questions from the audience, look at those hands go up. So yeah, I thought there might be a few. So I'll let you choose first. We can go to this. There you go.
Hi, I'm Dave Padbury from Guru Studio. I'm curious, two of you mentioned the amazing, insightful thoughts that children had in your focus groups and in your studies. I was wondering if you had anecdotes of specific words that stuck with you because they were profound or interesting or changed the way you thought of AI or even just made you laugh. And then I have a second bonus question, which is there a URL I can type into my computer right now and experience the sort of AI interaction that you think is ideal for children?
So anecdotes first.
And it's okay if the answer is no to the second one.
I think my answer is no to the second one, which isn't to say that that doesn't exist, just not off the top of my head.
Totally fair.
Yeah, no, I would say no as well. I wouldn't, and yeah, it feels like a very risky thing to try.
Yeah.
to try to say yes. On anecdotes and quotes, I mean, there's lots. One thing, a bit of a shameless plug, but from each of our research projects, we have short videos. From Children's AI Summit, there's a video, and from the research of the Lego Group, we have videos as well. And it is the best way to hear the findings of the research, to hear it from the children's voices themselves. Actually, I did have some quotes that I was going to save till the end, but I'm just going to read one now. And this is from a young person at the Children's AI Summit, this is... yes, so this is kind of summing up the ethos or the sentiment of what came out of those discussions. This was from Freddie, and Freddie said, AI as a creation can be used for huge amounts of global good. However, in the hands of those who only care for the size of their wealth, AI is used purely as a tool to maximize profits. AI is a useful tool that should be developed further, but we must put systems in place to stop it being used as a tool for corporate greed. Yeah, go Freddie.
Wow. Very good. Okay.
Hello, I'm Sharif. I'm from Ask Aulo. So we are a startup in technology space. We started in the beginning trying actually to build this AI safe for children. And actually it's not an impossible thing to build. It's something that we can iterate on. The problem we faced was that to build AI for children, it's actually way more expensive than building AI for adults because of all the extra checks that we need to do. And at the same time, well, actually we believe this is something very important for us to build. We struggle to find actually that the other ones that actually that want to pay for something like this. So this is the dilemma, that everyone wants it, but no one is able to pay for it. And I think big part of it is that also there is misunderstanding that all kinds of software today, like because we are being used to building software once, so that many times the same cost, but with Gen AI actually the cost incurs every time you use it. So it's a totally different digital product. So this is the dilemma. So there is a high cost for this product. It's not impossible to build. Who's gonna pay for it? Yeah, exactly. So we are now under the mercy of big tech, which the priority for them is gonna be like, okay, like I'm gonna build for the adults now. I'll think about children later, and the regulators will come at some point and say that, okay, we will just, if no one is going to build it, we will just treat AI like pornography. And we say like, okay, like you can't use AI unless if you are older than X years old, right?
I think there's probably a space for government as well in terms of investment.
Yeah,
We're
exactly. I hope that
UK
happens.
as being
Yeah.
a hub of AI safety, then do you want to pick up on?
Me? Yeah, so I'm glad someone else said it.
Yeah.
So it was just me. Yeah, it is, everything is more expensive when you have to basically do a version 2 for a different group of people. So just like you said, you often end up then just leaving them out unfairly. What was that a question? Or
Who pays?
Oh, who pays? Yeah, good question. I think that becomes a diversity issue as well, right? Because if it's only got the price point that's available for a certain type of person, a family or a household with a certain level of income, obviously only those households are going to pay for it. Same with schools as well. And so I think there's an issue. I don't know who's going to pay for it. Hopefully big tech or government would be lovely.
I think that, well, and forgive me if you don't agree, I think no one's paying for AI at the moment, right? I remain quite optimistic that, say we will win, that sort of, ethics, or perhaps like a move towards like better AI and things like that will win out. You know, I get told a lot, well, the government is only focused on growth. It doesn't want any rules or regulation or anything like that. But I feel, very strongly that but parents will expect that. It's just not happened yet. I think at the moment, my perspective is that we're just at a space where no one really is alive to the risks of AI. We all are, but the vast majority aren't. They kind of think it's neutral at worst. So I think that when they sort of become a bit more, basically I think it's just ahead of the game, actually. But, and yes, I agree, government definitely have a role here too.
Great. Mark.
I wanted to pick up on your mention about harvesting kids' data, because Frank Cottrell-Boyce mentioned it in the opening. A lot of the conversations up till now, before AI came along, was around kids targeting marketing data, very much framed by Copper in the US, so forced down to 13, maybe not right. I wondered, in both of your conversations with kids and teens, it's not just about information, new ways to create information and create content. The parasocial elements, the charisma AI who got sued for building these relationships which we just don't know whether they're a good substitute for a human relationship. Did that come out from the kids at all? Did they see it as an opportunity to have a virtual friend, a tutor, all of those things? Or do they see it as actually, maybe we're not ready yet?
Really mixed. I'll be interested to hear from the children we've engaged with as well, because again, most of the work we've done has been with children 8 to 12. And in the workshops that we've done there, very few children Next had said that they'd had any interactions with kind of AI companions. It came up as a discussion topic. Generally, the responses were, "Ooh, that's a bit creepy. It's a bit weird. It's a bit creepy." But at the Children's AI Summit, where we had children between the ages of 8 and 18, definitely amongst the teenage cohort, there was more kind of interest and experience and young people discussing what these companions might look like and how they might interact with them. A lot of interest actually in relation to mental health support, with massive caveats around the risks of this, and how this would need to be developed safely and responsibly. But this was something that young people were talking about, that they saw that there was a potential for it to be used there. I think there are obviously huge concerns, and there are a lot of these AI companions are kind of explicitly being marketed as tackling challenges of loneliness and isolation, and being marketed towards very young audiences. There's growing evidence of the risks of this, and particularly that if these are tools that are being marketed as addressing risks of loneliness, actually they're potentially creating dependencies on something that is very separate, disconnected from society and community, actually really exacerbating challenges and problems of loneliness. Big risks as well around emotional development, cognitive development, social development, how it impacts future relationships, including romantic relationships, where actually we're seeing that AI companions are potentially becoming more and more real, more and more often that young people may have their first kind of experimentation of romantic relationships with AI companions, and we don't yet fully know. We can anticipate and guess, but we don't yet fully know what the impacts of that's going to be. So sorry, I've gone away from what the kids have told us, back into a bit of a rant there, but
no, we've heard similar things. Like they there was one girl who was saying, I feel like I can't really talk to my parents, and my friends wouldn't get it, but I talk to this and they understand. I think that the problem is we do know that this would impact them, because we know about child development, and when they're growing up, human interaction, even things like making eye contact or the way that you hold yourself, are all skills that you really need to learn how to do. And a huge risk for children in AI is capture. So on chatbots, obviously they're just programmed to keep asking questions because they just want to keep you using it. And as an adult, you might be able to regulate and step away, probably not, to be honest. But as a child, you're even less able to do that. So it's a huge risk. And I think that we can confidently say, given how important child development is and all those in-person relationships are at that when you're growing up, that it is a huge risk. But then children are kind of torn about it. Some of them kind of do use it, but then, feel a bit like they shouldn't be using it. And actually, a lot of these companies would say that it's 18 plus anyway. Not that they have any age verification
I was going to say,
to prevent them from using it, but they often say this is for 18 plus, this is for adults, not kids.
I wonder whether it creates like a self-esteem issue as well, because if you have something in your pocket that is like way smarter than you, and smarter, then it's going to become smarter than humans, and it's just always there. Like I get self-conscious that I don't know how to write an email anymore, because I always draft an email and then get AI to polish it and then send it just to save me time. It gets to the point like, do I know how to actually write a polished email now? And then like I'm just going to ignore this. I'm just going to start writing my own emails. But you know, it's.
Is that a skill you'll need?
But it's a skill that I want, whether I need it or not. I want to just for my own self-esteem. I just want to be. I want to know that I can do it. And I just wonder if with kids, that I think that would be an issue. Like my daughter got asked to use AI to do homework, to do a drawing. It was art class. Said, it's kind of strange, I know. I was like, don't do that. But they said, your homework is to get AI to do your artwork and bring it back tomorrow, which I felt was a risk. It was strange. And I was like, I think the teacher also knows nothing about AI who told you to do this. But then I would feel like, if they keep doing that, at some point they'll be like, can I actually do artwork? And it's not a matter of whether, well, it doesn't matter if you can do it or not because AI can do it, because that shouldn't be the attitude. I think it's like, even if something can do it better, you should also be able to do it really well. And that would, I think it might create a self-esteem issue for people, because I feel it on a small level, but growing up with it, that must
You're
be
not building the skills, you're
Yeah.
just going straight to application. Yeah. We'll take one more question. There we go. And then get the panel to round up.
Hi, I don't know if you've seen the recent MIT study that's been published, and it had some very shocking results on basically when you use ChatGPT and generative AI tools, the impact that it has on brains. And these are 18 to 39-year-olds. So obviously there's a cognitive offloading that's happening. And like you said, Rishi, it's a cognitive offloading of critical thinking. So how do we ensure that these AI tools and AI playgrounds don't stunt the development of kids to be able to critically think and don't stunt their creativity, especially because they're very young early adopters?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's crucial, and big concerns around impacts on critical thinking. And the thing you're saying about self-esteem, actually, I think there's a kind of a potential opposite risk in that if you have an AI companion, it's constantly telling you, you're right, that's a great idea.
So AI is overwhelmingly
reinforced.
positive as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
That's the thing with AI is
Yeah.
I've tried so hard to make AI tell me I'm like wrong about something. It never will. Right,
Yeah.
it just give me all the caveats, but it's so positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think with that, like, what's really needed then is critical AI literacy. So, like, the AI literacy that's not just about understanding technically what these tools do, but critically knowing how they're working, the business models behind them, to make then informed choices. But of course, that's really challenging when these models are designed to be so captivating.
On the AI tutor that we've been working on, we saw that children are using ChatGPT as a shortcut to get to an answer, where we've been designing it Socratically, so it teaches you to use the knowledge that you've got and build on that, and you work towards so that's actually teaching and training, as opposed and also to give you responses to. It'll give you a question and then give you. Okay, that's a great response. If it was a 2-mark question, this is a 6-mark question, so you should try this and this and this. And that trains you to be good at passing exams, because these are the skills that you need to do to improve your educational outcome. So we're not trying to give you the shortcut, because that's it. So what I'd say there is designing the experiences so they achieve the goals. And at the moment, we're using foundation models, and the children are using foundation models, and they don't have any sense that there's a task there to ensure that they are imparting information. So let me quickly wrap that up. I want to give you one sentence each. What can you give us one actionable step creators can take now to build fair, safe and inclusive AI? Barry, you go first.
To put children's voices at the centre, and find mechanisms to give children an influence and a voice in shaping those decisions.
Correct.
That was going to be mine. So mine is read our children in AI design code.
Use it as a mechanism to test with children, and before you go ahead and spend those money doing the thing that you want to do. It's a great tool to learn before you do the real thing.
Great. Well, I'd like to thank the panel for brilliant contributions today. The room is going to be cleared so we can set up again. There's tea, coffee, sponsored by Blue Zoo, available in the usual places. Anything you missed today or today will be available on catch-up, gradually released after the conference. So just go to CMC 25 website, delegate area, and use your login, and you'll find it. And coming up next in here in Cinema 2 is the Art of Character Creation at 2 p.m. Another big thanks to Innovate UK for sponsoring this session, and thank you very much for joining us.